Look, at the end of the day, this war would not end in Ukraine. This war can end only in Moscow. This war can end only when Putin's regime is replaced. And obviously, it would not be done by Ukrainians or by NATO forces, British forces, whatever. It would be done by Russians. Somebody needs to do it. We are very thankful for Ukrainians who are helping us in terms of training our forces and providing us with the necessary equipment. But it's our job. It's not fair if Ukrainians would spill their blood for our freedom.
Welcome to Gaslit Nation. I am your host, Andrea Chalupa, a journalist and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine. And our opening clip was Ilya Ponomarev, a leader of the Free Russia Legion, speaking to LBC London. We're going to go into what the Free Russia Legion is, whether it's real or not, and what it means for the potentially, inevitable downfall of Putin. And we are doing a special fly by the seat of your pants taping of Gaslit Nation with members of our Patreon community who are here in the audience. We're going to go answer some questions from the folks that are here later on the show with our two extraordinary guests, two super women who are fighting the battle of human rights against fascism in the world. We have Kasia Babis, who's based in Poland. She is an activist and the illustrator of the Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship, It's Easier Than You Think. And she's been on the front lines of fighting the Trumpian government in power in Poland that has been consolidating media control, packing the courts with lackeys, and instilling an environment of hostility and fear towards LGBTQ people, women, immigrants, and banning reproductive health care, leading to, I believe, at least one death of a woman due to those laws. And Kasia has really put her body on the line at protests and has been roughed up and all of that in standing for human rights. And she took the material that Sarah Kendzior and I wrote for this book during a very dark time of 2020, of the pandemic and Trumpian fascist hell, where he was blatantly stealing that election in plain sight, leading to this slow-moving coup. And Kasia took our dark material, the stuff we talk about on the show, and she lightened it up with this hilarious personality and sense of humor and added all sorts of her own flourishes. And we were just laughing out loud when we got the pages back. So Kasia, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for all that you do. And my God, what was that experience like for you during the time of working on this book? And how did you approach everything? And how did you nail it so brilliantly?
Wow. So thank you for having me, and thank you for working with me on that amazing book. Truly, I think it's pretty unique in first, second books to hire not exactly comic script writers to write comics, but also people from our areas and people who have something interesting to say that is really fitting for a comic book form. And working with someone not strictly from a comic background is always very interesting. And you both did an amazing work with preparing a script for me. It was really clear. So anyways, it was so funny and lighthearted for such a difficult topic. And a lot of your takes were very similar to ones that I'm usually making when doing cartoons, political satire. So it was very my style. It was, like I said, extremely funny. And the bits were very easily translatable to comic book form, and also the characters, like the idea to create the narrator who is this shady but also likable character that I could through him tell these all amazing but also terrifying stories. It was such a fun narrative device, and also I think that my favorite part was character design for all the dictators. I love drawing their facial features and different characteristics and making them into those cartoonish characters, because I think it's a great tool to strip them of their inflated personas that they create according to basically spread their propaganda and appear more frightening and masculine. And I think it strips away that fear of them, and it's easier than to make fun of them and poke at some of their flaws in a very effective way.
Absolutely. I mean, your Trump was just like, he made his face physically look like an asshole. Like, you know?
Oh, thank you.
Like those puckered lips.
It's such a very good subject for cartoonists, and a lot of cartoonists from all over the world are having such a blast drawing him, and also in every take on him, because of course it's not the only book or comic strip that I was drawing him in. I have a different approach, and he's very grateful subject to every time I find something new in his facial features to cling on to while drawing. It's very fun.
And what was going on for you in your life? Because I remember Sarah and I signed that book deal right when the pandemic hit. And I was like, do we really want to commit to this project when I'm about to lose my babysitter? Like, what are we doing? You know, and it was like I had just had a baby, and I suddenly had no childcare because my babysitter at the time was like, hey, there's like a killer virus. I'll see ya. This whole idea was, well, we might as well do it because the world's coming to an end and we don't know if we'll ever get the chance to say what we need to say. And so we went ahead and did it. And it was nuts. It was really, really nuts taking care of a baby and running the show and fighting Trump through the podcast and making phone calls to get out the vote and research all this darkness, but put it through this whole like funny narrator bit. But what was that like for you? What was going on in Poland and for you in your life?
Yeah, well, I could only imagine how hard was it for you with all that stuff, like having kids and a job. And I personally think I got it pretty easy compared to other people because I was working from home anyways for over a year. And I didn't fear to lose my job. I don't have kids. So for me personally, it was none of my close relatives got really sick. So I was not personally affected as much as some other people. But in terms of like politics and what was happening in Poland and my activism, it was just crisis after crisis after crisis. The Polish government's maneuvers to strip away the tiny bit of what was left of our reproductive rights was going on. And then the crisis on the Belarusian border with refugees, and then of course
from the Middle East, refugees from the Middle East, and I believe Northern Africa were being flown to the border of Belarus and Poland by the Kremlin, by Russia and the dictator of Belarus, to try to put pressure on the EU, try to put pressure on Poland.
Yes, and unfortunately, that was the narrative that was used by our government to not let these people in, and it's of course illegal. It's forbidden by international law to make pushbacks, and that's basically what they did. And they explained themselves, telling everybody that what is going on is a hybrid war by Putin to destroy borders of the European Union through Poland. And I was just trying to comprehend how those few hundred people are going to destroy us exactly, because even if they were here legally, illegally, it doesn't really matter because the international law is very simple. We need to take them and then clear their status, because pushbacks, which are basically driving them back to the swamp, to the woods, and leaving them there to die from exposure, from dehydration. And some of them did die, and people were starving and left without water, and even activists were not let in to help them. We wanted to, and journalists wanted to know what's going on, but the whole area was basically closed by military, and we were not let in, and nobody was allowed to help these people and clear their legal status or even get them water or shelter or any basic needs. So I think we really need to remember that, and do not forgive Polish government for that, because in the light of current events with Ukraine, where we actually did help a lot, and I am proud to be Polish in these moments when we are helping, and our stance on Ukraine is, I think, very supportive and righteous. But we cannot forget what we as a nation did on the Belarusian border to those people, even if it was like the scheming on Putin's part. It doesn't matter; they are still people, and we are not going to fall because a few hundred or even 1,000 people came across our borders. We Polish people during the World War II, we were flooding all over the world, and there are many countries who took in millions of Polish people, and nobody asked about our legal status, and nobody asked are we really a war refugees, or maybe we have some ulterior motives and we just want to get richer, or we want social security of richer countries. So we were met with such a amazing generosity from other countries. I think it's our turn, and we need to do our part.
Yeah, without question. And that's all very well said. Thank you so much. What do you want people to know now about the situation in Poland, what you're up against?
Well, basically the government, the most heinous thing they did was the complete ban on abortion in basically what is now all cases, because obviously doctors are afraid to perform abortion, even if it is dangerous to women's life and health, even if like developing fetus has no brain. Basically nobody will dare to risk legal repercussions for inducing forced basically abortion. And even not only doctors are afraid, but regular people too, because there are many cases when miscarriages are being investigated, because you can't really tell on the early stages of pregnancy if the miscarriage was like forced, induced by some kind of, this is the most, as you well know, this is the most common form of terminating pregnancy. It's just a pill that you take. It's a medication, a drug that stops the pregnancy. So if you take this on purpose or by accident, you can't really tell, but police is still trying to investigate these cases. And even some people helping women to get pills are being prosecuted, like their boyfriends who bought them for them or assisted in them taking them. So it's really, really scary, but we are still trying to help women, and there are many organizations who try to send the pills to them or assist them and tell them when they can get them, or where to go, basically somewhere beyond Polish border to get this procedure done, because women are desperate. And of course, as you mentioned, some of them have died. A few have tragically lost their life because the necessary medical care was pushed farther back and was delayed until it was too late, basically. Even in the cases when the fetus is actually dead in the womb, some doctors will not intervene in any form because they're afraid taking any action, really. And I see that happening in the US right now, and I was seeing that before it was all happening. If I am thinking correctly, you also had some changes in the the highest constitutional court, and that allowed some states to try and ban abortions as well. And before that was happening, I also, in the discourse in the United States, seen the exact same points that were brought up here many years ago. And here it developed to a situation when the abortion is totally banned across the whole nation. So I am really scared for you too.
Yeah, it's a nightmare what's happening here. We're living so far a very, very dark nightmare. How are you guys pushing back? Because the Trumpian government, the far-right government in Poland, they've captured the courts, they've captured state media. What else? What other power leverage that they have? I mean, so how are you able to resist? Like, what actions are you taking, or do you have levers of power?
Yes, the first symptoms were, of course, the maneuvers at the Constitutional Court, and these were some years ago. I can't remember right now, the first huge massive protests in Poland. It was defending the Constitutional Court, so it's not taken over, but Law and Justice government. And as it is with, I think, all really big protests, there were some battles that we won, but overall, it really didn't make that huge of a difference, because then when they had a clear path to make any law they want, they tried for the first time to change the law on abortion, and then there were huge protests, and I think they got a little bit scared back then, because the change in the law was supposed to be more drastic, even though we back then had the most restrictive abortion law in whole Europe, but still they wanted to make it worse, and they did make it worse, because the next time they tried to change the law, the protests were the biggest I have ever seen. And I am not that old, so maybe I haven't seen a lot, but also they were factually the biggest protests since 1980s, and the last we've seen something like that was when the communist regime was falling apart, and it was truly an amazing formative experience. Amazing is a bad word, but it was a formative experience to me to engage in that, because it was really a massive movement all across the country, all wearing black, because the black was worn by Polish women when we were occupied by other countries, so we can sort of mourn for our country. So we were mourning once again, and it was called the Black Protests. We were all wearing black, and I remember it was really rainy, so we all went out to the streets with umbrellas, and I remember those pictures from drones from up above, where all the streets are just flooded with black umbrellas, and it looked really, we felt so powerful back then, just because we were supporting each other, and we felt like we are really changing something, because how can they not listen to such a massive crowd, and how can this government go on after they caused such a divide? But somehow they always can do what they want, and I think you know how it works, because you wrote a brilliant comic book about this, so
which you illustrated.
Yeah, that's why it was so easy to me. This is so clear what is happening, and yeah, it is happening all over again. And to be pretty honest with you, I after all of that, I feel really powerless, and I went through a crisis in my activism and political activity, because like I said, we did all of that and it meant nothing. But I'm trying, for a few years now, I'm trying to come to terms with that. And this, by the way, is going to be a whole point of my next, I don't know if next, because I have few projects going on, and I don't know which one is going to be first, but I'm working on a comic book based on my memories. And it's going to be pretty much about that, about the reproductive rights in Poland, and how it all influenced me and created me as an activist, as a person, and how to deal with that feeling of powerlessness, and and burnout in trying to fight for a change.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to having you back on the show to talk about your memoir when it's out. So there's a question in the chat about John Paul II. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
I am familiar with him.
Was he a Nazi cutout during the war along with Pope Benedict? And do you see, so the question is, let me just read it. So for you and Kasia, are Poland's and Texas's abortion laws John Paul II's revenge? Once a Nazi, always a Nazi. Both he and Benedict were at least cutouts during World War II. And cutouts are people who are essentially secret agents for, collaborators. So I don't know, I'm not like a John Paul II historian, so I don't know what his involvement was during World War II. But what would you say to that?
Okay, so I can say a lot of things and a lot of bad things about John Paul II. Basically, it's also a very huge character in my next comic book. It's a whole chapter devoted to him because actually, no, my generation in Poland was called Generation JP II. That means generation of John Paul II. And it's ironic because back then we were named that after he died because everyone thought we're going to be so devoted to his message and his memory. But it turned out ironic because we all started to rebel against his maniac cult cult-like status in Poland. Like basically, I was saying lately that the Poland is not like a Catholic country as it was claiming to be for a long time. It's a papist cult basically of the dead Pope right now. We have thousands and thousands of statues of him, and in school I remember it was the central characters of all Polish identity. And so he was definitely covering up pedophilia in Catholic Church, and this is his biggest sin, so to say. He was also had his share in the HIV epidemic in Africa because he was trying actively to maybe not ban, but really restrict access to contraception and in underdeveloped countries. So this was definitely had its impact. And he was a bad person, but I have never heard about collaborating with the Nazis. This is something that had never came up. And trust me, the left in Poland was invigilating his character left and right. So either there is something I still don't know, but I don't think that part is true. It's also true that here in Poland, there is commonly believed that he himself destroyed communism because in Poland, we really associate the return to power of the Catholic Church with the fall of communism, because the communists were not very fond of Christianity. So all people in Poland, not all, but many people in Poland believe that he was the main reason why the communist regime fell in Poland, which is obviously a little bit ridiculous. But yeah, I think the main focus right now in critiquing his character is his covering up of pedophilia. And this is a big discourse right now in Poland, because in the mainstream, you can't really say that. You're going to be ostracized and you're going to be accused of being anti-Polish and anti-God himself if you dare to say he had anything to do with covering pedophilia in Catholic Church.
And you're based in Warsaw now.
Yes.
I want to just let our audience know that I spent several months in Warsaw and I didn't want to leave. And Warsaw, it's like a giant neighborhood in Brooklyn. It's just like everybody's wearing black. Everyone looks like they work in the arts or something. They all have dogs. They all just hang out in parks with their dogs and their black t-shirts. And at least on Yelp, which is English language, it was all the reviews are written in English. Like the number one, there's tons of vegetarian and vegan restaurants, which is important to point out for Eastern Europe, where you think meat and potatoes is every meal. But it's a hipster kingdom, Warsaw, and I loved it so much. And the symbol is a mermaid, and my own symbol is a mermaid. So I felt like,
a badass mermaid with a sword and a shield.
That's how I see myself.
Warsaw is great. Many of my friends had tattoo of that mermaid. Actually, it's a badass story. She was a fighter, and she's a great symbol. Anyway, I love Warsaw too. I moved here from the eastern part of Poland, not so like an hour and a half by car. So basically, by US standards, it's practically Warsaw too. But anyway, Warsaw is spoiling all us vegetarians, definitely. Like when I'm traveling across Europe, I've never been outside of Europe, but in Europe, when I'm traveling, it's basically everywhere. It's harder to get a good vegetarian or vegan meal, and it's really green. We have a lot of trees in Warsaw, and also a river in the middle of the city with like beaches, and you can just chill and have a picnic. And I love the city. It's really great, and I know that many of my haters on Twitter won't believe me, but I really love Poland too, and I wouldn't fight against its government. If I didn't like it, I would just leave. So I care about this country. It's really sad because, like you say, it can be pretty beautiful. So it's worth fighting for.
Absolutely. So I want to include Olga in this as well. But what about the Ukrainian situation? I mean, Warsaw, I think the population doubled with all the refugees that came in, and you were active in that. There was a Gaslit Nation listener that reached out to me saying that she wanted to go to Poland to help, and you very thoughtfully provided an extraordinary email of resources for anybody who wanted to just go to Poland and help. So talk to us about like what you've been doing because of the war, and what is the situation like now? So just talk us through that.
Yeah, well, not doubled, but we definitely have a lot of people that moved in here because, like I said, on this front, we acted like we should, and we really opened our arms and our borders and our hearts to all the Ukrainian people. And the first weeks were pure chaos, which was awful, but also beautiful in a way that we all mobilized. Because right now it's calm. We know what's going on, and all the proper agencies are doing their work in helping people find housing and helping people move. But the first weeks, nobody knew what to do. We never seen a crisis like that. So everybody was helping however they could. So my fiance and some of my friends were basically anybody who had a car and some free time was driving to the border to offer their car to move people to places where they could stay for at least some time, because people were just taking their backpacks and children and pets and sometimes walking to the Polish border because they were so afraid or they were bombed. So it was as personal as it could get. We were driving to the border, taking anybody who wanted a lift, and we asked them, where do you want to go, and driving them there. I was helping in Warsaw in a center. There were a few that just popped up. It was totally from people. There were no government agencies overlooking that. We were just finding a place where we can store the resources and store people so they can spend the night and eat a warm meal and get some clothes and maybe get some legal advice or shoes. So whatever they needed. People were offering their houses. Some of my friends were living with Ukrainian families for a while. some business owners were offering places, like hotel owners were offering just rooms for free. And there were different groups of people helping exclusively pets, for example, or anyone who knew the language was translating. Everybody helped. Everyone I knew. I don't know a single person who didn't help in some way. So it was beautiful and uplifting, and I really saw regain a lot of faith of humanity in that. But also it was so scary because we didn't know, are we next? How long is Ukraine gonna last? We all back then, we didn't think they're gonna be so brave and so good on the front, so they're gonna be still fighting. So we were thought, oh my God, we're next. We're trying for a house. We are trying to buy a house, and we're thinking, should we buy it? Should we maybe escape to Germany, because we're so close to the border, and then my parents are living close to the border as well. You remember when the missile hit? It was a stupid mistake, as it turned out, but everyone was ready, right? Yeah, to fight or to flee. And people were asking me, my people from other countries were asking me if I'm okay, which is pretty funny because Warsaw feels so safe. Oh, I remember there are some Facebook groups of Americans who want to visit Poland or such. So they were asking if it's safe to travel here. And it was so abstract for me because I'm just living my normal life and people act like it's a war zone, but it's not so far away. It really is. And people are losing their houses and losing their close ones, and genocides are happening. So how do you live your life and draw your silly comics and play with your pets and play the new Zelda game when right next to you people are fighting or mourning their relatives' deaths? Some of my friends were crying because their boyfriends were decided to go to Ukraine and fight. Some of my Polish friends decided they want to, not my friends, I'm not going to claim they're my friends, but I know some people who decided to go and fight with Ukrainians. So it's so hard to comprehend. And of course, it was really sweet to the whole world, and the American citizens as well were so concerned and wanted to help. But some people who wanted to come here and help personally, it was so sweet. But also it would be such a waste of resources to spend money on the tickets just to randomly go to a train station and give soup to people, because we have a lot of people who want to help. What we didn't have back then was resources. So
money,
I was giving
basically.
Yes,
it's better to make a donation than show up.
Yes, make a donation. You don't need to be here. We got this. Also, there was a huge scandal with I think it was an American guy who wanted to make an app to connect people, refugees escaping, with people who want to house them.
Okay.
But he didn't think of dangerous situation like sex trafficking and exploitation. So my friend called him out on that on Twitter, I think, and he completely bashed her and sent his fans to to also hate on her. And it was a whole thing. And it was funny because it was like a tech guy who thought he single-handedly resolved such a great humanitarian crisis. But it was a great lesson to always ask people on the ground what they need and really listen to what they need, and not to try act like a hero all the time.
Absolutely. So let's check in with Olga Lotman on the war. Olga, what is going on with all these reports that the Russian Freedom Legion is liberating Russia?
First, before I start, I just want to say how grateful I am to Poland and thankful because luckily Ukraine has a neighbor who really has balls, and unlike a lot of Western European countries, is not worrying about what Putin thinks before acting. Polish government has been on, the front lines with allowing weapons to pass through, with training Ukrainian military people, and doing everything in order to make sure that Ukraine defeats Russia. That's very interesting. Russia right now is occupied attempting to secure their border. This group, I'm not sure what this group is. Honestly, I don't believe in any Russians who are fighting against Russia and created a legion, to go fight against Russia.
Yeah, but
apparently,
I just want to jump in and just to clarify for those not following this story, there's been social media selfies going up of a very well-armed militia called the Russian Freedom Legion. They have a Twitter account with several thousands of followers. They're apparently roped in with Russian opposition figures like Mark Fagan, who's a Russian civil rights lawyer that represented Pussy Riot, and others like that. And they claim that they've been fighting alongside the Ukrainians inside Ukraine. They're very secretive, for obvious reasons, you'd imagine, because they're Russians, and Russians the Russian military tends to be extremely brutal against so-called traitors. They even have like a symbol for that, which is a hammer, where they killed one deserter or somebody, a Russian.
Well, that's Wagner. That's not the Russian military. Wagner.
Yeah. I've been told a million times by our listeners it's Wagner. But so now the Russian Freedom Legion is in southern Russia, like north of Kharkiv, in these villages right near Belgorod, or Belgorod, as you'd say in Russian, and it's near a nuclear site, right, where nuclear missiles are being kept. And there's social media videos and other images popping up of them taking selfies with a Russian border guard station that they emptied out because the Russian border guards fled, and they keep pushing and claiming that they're liberating these towns. So do you think this is really, do you think the Russian Freedom Legion is real? Is it Ukrainian PSYOPs? Is it the CIA?
I don't think it's Ukrainian. I still honestly haven't figured out what it is, except that, I keep hearing here and there they take credit for certain things. But the operation itself is real. They did go and cross the border, and they killed several FSB agents at the border post. On the border between Ukraine and Russia, and then they continued moving in. And they took over a police station. There were drones attack against a FSB building yesterday. And today, Russia still can't get them out. And now they put a general in charge who actually lost Kharkiv and lost during the counteroffensive in Irkutsk and the rest of the cities that were temporarily occupied by Russia. They put him in charge of now freeing Belgorod. What it is, I'm not sure, but you know what? As long as it keeps Russia, occupied, trying to secure, because they're going to have to move their troops over to secure the border, and it's a very, very long border between Ukraine and Russia. So right now, it's humiliating for Putin. It's humiliating for the Russian Defense Ministry. The fact that their border is so, can be penetrated so easily with no hesitation, and the fact that we're now 48 hours into whatever this is, and these people are still going. So, I mean, it's a good thing, but it speaks to the bigger thing of what's happening inside of Russia, because this is just one small operation. But since last fall, I've been documenting pretty much the beginnings of the collapse of Russia. And you see what I mean. The minute you saw Wagner and and Prigozhin, start a public fight with the Russian Defense Ministry and the elite, and calling for the seizing of assets of the oligarchs. And the minute you saw this, I mean, this is something that was unthinkable in the Soviet Union. I mean, people would be, executed for that. And here it is playing out on Telegram. He has obviously his loyal supporters, all the propaganda military bloggers. And, obviously he ran a troll farm and he is extremely savvy at running information warfare operations as he did in the United States. And he was indicted for it as he does across Europe, in Poland, trying to split the far left and the far right, propping up the far right. And plus, so we know his operations across Africa, executions in Syria and whatnot. But that is also, again, just another bit of what is happening, because just in general, Putin is losing control, and you see more and more signs and this actually started after Ukraine had a successful counteroffensive. This is when the backlash against the Russian officials and defense ministry began on social media by Russians after that offensive and after the counteroffensive. And it's only gotten worse. I mean, with every single defeat that they suffer, with the fact that, they claim to have Bakhmut 10 months later, and it's not even clear if they have it, and it's 4.5 square miles. I mean, we're not talking about, at the rate if they continue like this, they'll get to Kiev in about 50 years, because, I mean, it takes 10 months for 4.5 square miles to potentially have it, which they're not going to have for long either, because Ukrainian military is surrounding them. So it's just a mess in there. It really is just a mess. And then there's a fight, that's been brewing between the Chechens and the Russian Orthodox nationalists. And you have all these factions inside of Russia that, were kept under control under Putin for 20 plus years. All these factions are beginning to unravel. And the country is so big and so diverse that it's extremely hard with this to keep everyone in line.
That's amazing. So would you say it's the beginning of the end for Putin?
I would say it's definitely, Putin's end is coming soon. One way or another, his end is coming soon. My worry is that this is not Putin's war. This is the Russian people's war. It is the Russian people who are executing Ukrainians, raping Ukrainians, robbing Ukrainians, creating the mass graves. So my biggest worry is that it is too easy to put it on a regime when you had close to 1 million Russians who fled Russia after mobilization or the part mobilization. Yet they could have come out in the streets and toppled the government. And again, with your movie, Mr. Jones, this is something, this historical thing between Ukrainians and Russians goes back so many centuries. You pick up with Stalin and his genocide against Ukrainians, but this is something that goes back for centuries. This is not, NATO as pro-Kremlin propagandists want us to believe. This is like a superiority that Russians feel, and it's that they own Ukrainians and the Ukrainians are slaves, that they own Belarusians and Georgians and Kazakhs and pretty much everyone who was under the old Soviet Union. So it comes back to that. And Putin did start the war because he was pretty much, getting old and has nothing to leave like in the history books. So he thought reinstating or attempting to reinstate the Soviet Union, would get him into the history books as someone as a powerful leader and have statues across Russia created for him and whatnot. And clearly we saw, they wanted the opposite. They went in with occupying Crimea and parts of Donbass, and they're going to leave with absolutely nothing. And they'll be lucky if they have Belgorod, because Ukrainians are, thinking of creating a buffer zone just to make sure that Russia, there's enough space between the borders so this never happens again.
Do you think the KGB dictatorship of Putin, do you think they're going to respond by using nukes?
That question comes up pretty much with every single time something happens. And Russia, look, I can't predict whether Putin will use nukes or not. He probably would tactical nuclear weapons. But I don't
What are
think that
tactical nuclear weapons?
they are more localized. It's not a, intercontinental ballistic, warhead carrying
so
nuclear
against
warhead.
Kharkiv, he could do it, or against,
He could do it, exactly. So, I mean, I would not discount it because, I think that he's extremely capable of that. The Russian, Putin's government and Yeltsin's government and the Soviet communist governments, I mean, they've never had a respect for human life, ever. I mean, Stalin sent, he committed genocide against Ukrainians, but at the same time, he also sent how many millions of Russians to the Gulag for execution, so it's a very cruel regime that, is, again, centuries old, and they use the same tactics, and they've just never evolved mentally. So I wouldn't discount it. But again, it's not going to change anything militarily. Like, even if he does choose to use tactical nuclear weapons inside of Ukraine, it will basically make a certain area uninhabitable. But that's it. I mean, it's not going to change anything. Ukrainians aren't going to say, oh, wow, we just had a nuclear attack, so here, take Ukraine. If anything, they'll be screaming even louder. This is exactly who, we're fighting against. The West is not going to cave in and be like, oh my God, they use nuclear weapons and we just have to stop supporting Ukraine. So it's not going to change anything militarily. So, I mean, hopefully he won't. Hopefully the people who are surrounding him understand this. And I'm pretty sure that they do, because if not, you even see how Putin has been pressuring Lukashenko to send in the Belarusian army over the past year. And even with Lukashenko, he's, found every excuse under the sun not to send Belarusians, because he knows that they will switch sides and start shooting Russians the minute they cross over the border. Not the whole military, but a good percentage will, because Belarusians historically have nothing, against Ukrainians. So that's why you see we are now, 15 months or 14 months, or feels like 15 centuries into this. And you see Lukashenko still hasn't pulled that trigger of, using the Belarusian military to conduct operations inside of Ukraine.
Yeah, and Vladimir Putin remains a master strategist. I remember, like back when the total war broke out.
Can I just stop you 1 second? Everyone thinks that, Putin is such a master strategist. I remember in the early 2000s watching, people who are watching his body language and interpreting, what is he doing? What is he saying? What does he mean by this word? His only gift is the greed of the West. That's the only gift he has. And that is the only reason the Soviet Union didn't survive, because he can buy Western politicians, hence Trump, and that whole crew. He can buy Western propagandists, journalists, and basically everything is because of money. If the money didn't exist, Putin would have been gone in 2008 after Georgia's invasion. Go ahead now.
Yeah, no, absolutely, without question. It's so I remember a year ago when the total war broke out, you said, like, you and I got on the phone, like right when it was all going down, that nightmare moment when the Russians invaded in those early morning hours, just like the Nazis did, invading the Soviet Union. And the first thing you said to me, like, and I will never forget this, you said, Putin threw away 20 years of spycraft in one night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Putin decided, because what happened is he calculated, as he's been cultivating, we see Western figures inside of the United States, across Europe, over the past 20 decades, he's been doing obviously the same in Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine had so many, Russian agents infiltrated.
And they were all working with Giuliani and Paul Manafort.
Apparently. Seriously. So he thought that Ukraine was going to collapse from within. He didn't think that it was going to be, because honestly, he should know. And that's why I was shocked even, and I had made jokes on my podcast the summer prior, because I was warning about this full-scale invasion for the year prior to this. And I made jokes and said, I hope Putin doesn't rely on his military because, yes, they're cruel, they're evil, they will have no bounds, they will target civilians. That's a strategic target. But at the same time, they've robbed everything. I mean, they have robbed everything. All the military leaders, all the defense industry companies, for every $1 million contract, 800,000 goes into the pockets and 200,000 goes to something. So I had said, if he's relying on his military, that is not going to work because the military is technically all the money and technology is parked in villas and yachts and, and offshore companies in the West. It's not inside of the thing. And we even see, with this feared hypersonic missiles, where are they? Russia was putting out propaganda videos over the past decade showing them coming to United States. Like, I saw the video constantly. Where are these hypersonic, his fleet of hypersonic? He even lost, the scientist died who made the hypersonic, who was responsible for the hypersonic weapons. So,
those scientists were arrested. They were just arrested.
Yeah, last year they were arrested. There were several of them. They were actually accused for selling secrets to China, which is interesting. So when this started, he was, factoring that this was going to happen from within, that Ukraine will be taken. And then at the same time, the West was going to do no more than offer their deep concerns. And here, this obviously didn't happen. The West banded together stronger than ever. I mean, it is fascinating to see that NATO found its true mission. And, and you see the real European, US, Canadian, Asian alliance, so strong. And that's it. And as a result, what happened instead? He got sanctioned. And everyone, literally, Europe, United States, everyone started going after the money. They started breaking up all the operations, Russian spy nest across Europe, in United States. I mean, I'm sure everybody sees now, like every other day, there's a new indictment of Russians here who are attempting to help Russia bypass sanctions.
An American, a New York City attorney just got indicted by the DOJ.
Yeah, well, there are so many, I wouldn't even know which one. There was a Greek national in New York for aircraft, sending aircraft. There were 2 Russians in Trump Tower in Florida that the FBI conducted a search, and they were arrested for military, sending like dual use military, I believe, stuff and helping Russia evade sanctions. I mean, it's literally every week there is something. So right now, I mean, for 20 years, Putin had all his agents on the ground. He had all the propagandists in place. He had RT, Sputnik, and all the, media outlets embedded in Western society, Latin America, Africa, Middle East, all the spy networks, everything. And after this, now he blew it. I mean, all you hear is spy nests being exposed in Europe. I mean, there's a whole series, Danish investigation of a whole series of spies that were exposed and expelled from Denmark. Same is happening in Norway, Sweden. I mean, you name it, it's happening. Germany, even the Germans, who were kind of la-di-da and like neutral, have now taken a very hard stance, against Russia, especially after it came out that, there was a violent coup attempt against them. And this is not even it's about Ukraine, but I mean, Putin's ambitions were bigger. It was going to be Ukraine, it was going to be Moldova, Georgia, and it was going to continue on and on until, he, in his head, reinstates the Soviet Union. And that's why it's so important to stop him in Ukraine.
If everything you just listed, the breaking up of all these spy dens, and the unity, the strength of NATO, and the full-throated support of these Western leaders, including Germany, which was stuck under Angela Merkel's appeasement policy towards Ukraine for so long. If all of this had been in effect years prior, like on the heels of the Crimea invasion and Putin invading eastern Ukraine in the spring of 2014, Donald Trump would never have been president.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll backtrack because Putin came into power in 1999 by
You
blowing
still
up
have reproductive
apartments.
health care protected in every state. Sorry, go on.
Yes. He came into power in 1999 by blowing up apartment buildings and killing Russians. That's how he came into power. Right after, they committed a massacre. What we're seeing in Ukraine happened in Chechnya. From there, he committed assassinations on foreign soil. We saw Litvinenko being poisoned by polonium, nuclear material on British soil used to take one of his people out. And that was just one of so many on foreign soil. Then we saw the biggest and the first probably and largest cyber attack against Estonia, basically making the country like paralyzed for several weeks. And that was Russia was behind it. Then we saw the invasion of Georgia, same exact operation like Ukraine, and where they, use cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns. And then went in and physically invaded and took parts of Georgia. And again, it was a bloody massacre. Then we saw Syria. And I mean, they have committed countless atrocities. Out of the close to between 700,000 and 1 million Syrians who are dead, Russia is responsible for a large amount because of the air cover they provided for Assad, and also for helping him cover up and running a disinformation operation for the chemical attacks that Assad was using against his people. So then Syria happened, and then we had Crimea, and Russia is, now I joke because I'm like, oh, look, the little green men are going to Russia. Well, basically, this is what happened in Crimea. Russia's little green men, which were mercenaries and intelligence operatives and military divisions, came in and seized Crimea and parts of Donbass. And then we had an attack on the Polish elections in 2015, I believe. It was called Waitergate, where the Russians tapped the Polish prime minister and released the conversations and hacked into emails and everything, which was a test to 2016.
In America's election. And then there was Brexit. Yes. Brexit as well.
And then Brexit and France and Germany. I mean, literally, I think 5 elections were interfered with between 2015 and 16. And then we have our influence agent. I mean, honestly, there's nothing more. He works for Russia and not, since 2015.
You're talking about Trump.
Andrea, no, I went back to the late 1970s. His first deal was with a Russian mobster who was a Soviet military pilot who came here with $1 in 2 years, had like $1 million, and ended up buying several Trump apartments with $5 million in a suitcase, which Trump personally, rented. That was 1984. And from there, it just continued. He went to Moscow in 87. He allegedly, a Russian spy, claims that she's the one who targeted him. She worked in the Soviet UN mission to New York in 1985. So, I mean, it's a very long history, close to 40 years. And that's it. So if Putin had been, to make you a very short question, very long, and give you a long answer, had Putin been stopped over a decade ago, we would have never had any of this. We would have never had this division, because in 2015, this is how I actually got involved. I started seeing the same operations happening on the Russian side against the United States as what happened in Georgia, as what happened in Ukraine. It was identical with the blueprint. And that's how I got involved, to see what in the world is going on, and why I started investigating Trump, to see why him, what happened. And that's when I uncovered all of that. But he You know, he works for, not that he works for them. He's just a thug who, you know, basically makes money where it's easy. The Russian mafia flooded his properties over the past several decades with countless cash. And he was their guy to come in. They helped get him in, use the same tactics that they used pretty much in Ukraine and other elections and societies that they interfered with to install him. And as a result, we have a literally Kremlin operation who's still going on. I mean, it's still going on, this division, polarization. And this was exactly what Paul Manafort did in Ukraine in 2003. Literally, Ukrainians started fighting with Ukrainians. No one understood. Why is everyone so angry? Why is everyone fighting? And this is what Manafort did when he started working for the former treasonous president who was prosecuted for treason of Ukraine. Yep, and that's exactly what he did, and it's the same identical playbook. I mean, nothing. They didn't change anything except maybe the bots and trolls that didn't exist in 2003. So technology-wise, they expanded. Same playbook, divide and conquer. And that's what they've been doing.
Yeah, Ukraine has always been a testing ground of Kremlin aggression. And that's why it's so important so important that we stop Russia and Ukraine.
Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up on our Patreon at the Truth Teller level or higher.
We encourage you to donate to help rescue and recovery efforts in Turkey and Syria following the devastating earthquakes in early February. To help people in Turkey, visit the TPF Türkiye Earthquake Relief Fund at tpfund.org.
To help Syrians in need, donate to the White Helmets at whitehelmets.org. We also encourage you to help support Ukraine by donating to Razom for Ukraine at razomforukraine.org. In addition, we encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Ukraine, Syria, and Afghanistan. Donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org and avoid products with palm oil. Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah Kenzier and Andrea Chalupa. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going.
Our production manager is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon exclusive content is edited by Carlin Daigle.
Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle.
Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher. Footsie Tootsies,
Chick Quinn,
Lily Wachowski,
Sean Rubin,
Todd S. Pearlstein,
Kenny Main,
John Schoenthaler,
Ellen McGirt,
Joel Farron,
Larry Gasson,
Erica Moore,
Karen A. Deal,
Nico Phillips,
Brian E. Castor,
Tatjana Birch,
Karen Heisler,
Ann Bertino,
Chris Bravo,
Stephanie Brandt, MD,
John Millett,
David East,
Ida,
Ben Wheaton,
Joseph Mara Jr.,
Julie Matthews,
Meganopolis,
Mark Merck,
Barbara Kittredge,
Matthew Womack,
Silas Frank,
Sean Berg,
Kristen Custer,
Tracy Ash,
Kai Gellis,
William Barry Reeves,
Sharon Hattrick,
Richard Smith,
Emmy,
Kevin Gannon,
Mike Christensen,
Sandra Collins,
Katie Masuris,
John Laughlin,
Emily Fenning,
James D. Leonard,
Leo Chalupa,
he's back, couldn't stay away, Carol Golstad,
Jason Benke,
Marcus J. Trent,
Joe Darcy,
Ann Marshall,
Jeremy Lewis,
Joel Newman,
Trigve,
D.L. Singfield,
Matt Perez,
Nicole Spear,
Brian Tajuden,
Abby Road,
Jens Eilstrup Rasmussen,
Z.W.,
Kathy Kavanaugh,
Sarah Gray,
Diana Gallagher,
Jennifer Ann Luter,
John Ripley,
Ethan Mann,
Leah Campbell,
Lynn Schneider,
Jared Lombardo,
Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all for your support. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.
Thank you.